I want to make a few quotations as laid out in the Guardian newspaper regarding the Scottish independence referendum, which will be held in September. This is something I care deeply about because it actually gets to the very future of this nation, and by this nation I mean the United Kingdom. I'm a staunch unionist, and I seriously hope that Scotland doesn't break away. Anyway, before I get into that, I want to just make these quotations. Now, this is from the Guardian newspaper, so before you flame me, this is from the Guardian. If you have an issue with it, take it up with the Guardian. So what they've done is just basically, it's from yesterday's newspaper. It's sort of a pretty balanced thing there. Yes, no. So the no's are people who believe that Scotland should remain in the United Kingdom. Yes is people who believe it should break away. So this is some of the things that people have said, and this is quotations from the Guardian. This is first of all the yes supporters. If anyone can make the people of Scotland believe, it will be Alex Salmond. That's Hardeep Singh Kohli, writer and presenter. The more Westminster disappoints, then the more attractive and untraumatic independence may seem. Al Kennedy, author. I'm voting yes for having my own parliament. Poor or rich, left wing or right, it will be mine and my business. E.D. Reader, singer. I always think the Union is nature's way of stopping the Scots ruling the world. We'd be unstoppable if we were independent. Irvine Welsh, novelist. We're voting for an independent Scotland because we believe that we should take responsibility for our own lives. The Proclaimers, Craig and Charlie Reid. Okay, before I move on to some of the no quotations, I just want to evaluate a little bit of that. Well, first of all, Hardeep Singh Kohli. I've seen this guy before briefly on Question Time. This is the man who claimed that England was subjugating Scotland. Now, when Scottish nationalists talk in these sort of terms, I think it is odious, because if they want to see real subjugation, they should look at examples around the world. Subjugation implies serious human rights abuses. It implies the sort of imperialism of one group of people over another. Let's be very clear. Scotland is not ruled by England. Scotland is not part of England. Scotland and England are still separate kingdoms, which happen to be united under one crown and under one United Kingdom, hence it being the United Kingdom. But the idea that Scotland is subjugated by England is absolute tosh. I'm voting yes for having my own parliament. Poor, rich, left wing or right, it will be my business, be mine and my business. Eddie Reader, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce her name, but that just shows to me the petty-mindedness of nationalists. It will be mine and my business. So what's she saying, that you know, Scotland is not part of the international community? Mine and my business. So this idea that, you know, basically comes down to the idea that Westminster rules us. But the problem is, where do you draw the line? Because Shetland Islanders can then say, oh, Edinburgh rules us. So where do you draw the line? It's just, to me, that's just petty thinking. I live in the northeast of England. I couldn't care less that London is the capital. This idea that a nation's capital must always be close by is ridiculous. I mean, under that line of thinking, people in Vladivostok can argue, oh look, Moscow's thousands of kilometers away. People in Guangzhou in China could argue Beijing is thousands of kilometers away. You know, this sort of pettiness to me is just, I fully understand the argument about local concerns, and sometimes when a government seems far away that can be an issue, but I also think it translates into pettiness when you get to the point of the geography of it alone. It's just stupid. Now this one really strikes me, Irvine Welsh. And Irvine Welsh is a guy who has pretty radical views on the Union, and on a lot of issues, but his quotation, I always think the Union is nature's way of stopping the Scots ruling the world. We'd be unstoppable if we were independent. Oh really? Well, I have two words for that. Darien scheme. If you're not familiar with that, the Darien scheme was an attempt actually to establish pretty much a Scottish empire. Guess what? It was a miserable failure. That was at the end of the 17th century, beginning of the 18th century. Can't remember the exact years, but there was an attempt to establish Scottish imperialism. And I don't know if he's being ironic, but I think it's still a pretty extreme statement to make. And it shows basically the sort of ultra-nationalism that we're seeing from the Scottish nationalists. The proclaimers are a bit more moderate. Now, I want to make this clear, I don't think all Scottish nationalists are extremists, but I do think there's a general trend among, especially cybernats, to be pretty extreme nationalists, and pretty petty-minded, and frankly xenophobic and jingoistic in their world outlook. And if that's the future of Scotland, good luck to them. So this is some quotations from the No campaign, and I am biased. I'm for the No campaign, but I think the Guardians laid it out 50-50 here. Anyway, J.K. Rowling. There will be no going back. The separation will not be quick and clean. It will take microsurgery to disentangle 3 centuries of close interdependence. That's J.K. Rowling. Why do we want to become smaller? Surely we want to expand and look outward. Let's go into Europe and be one big happy family. David Tennant, actor. I am a proud patriotic Scot, passionate about my heritage and my country, but I am not a nationalist. Susan Boyle, singer. I feel like it's a protest vote and it shouldn't be a protest vote. We won't get to vote for it ever again. So if I voted tomorrow, I'd vote no. David Shrigley, artist. People have been hammered by austerity all over. Everybody has been hammered, not just the Scottish. We can't be nationalistic about it. Bobby Gillespie, singer with Primal Scream. Now, of course I'm going to say this, but I think those are much more reasonable statements. I mean, to digest those a bit, J.K. Rowling, she received a massive amount of abuse yesterday from cybernats because she gave £1 million to the No campaign. But they sort of turned it on her like, oh, Scotland protected you when you were a single mother in terms of welfare. But they're making out that she's some sort of Tory supporter. This is about the Union. It's not about Toryism. And the idea that she is against the welfare state because she supports the unity of the United Kingdom is utterly absurd. And it's typical of the distortion of Scottish nationalists. Firstly, it's her right to donate to whoever she wants. And the sort of abuse she received online is typical of cybernats. But the idea, and this is something they frequently do, they try to associate unionism automatically with Toryism. I am no Tory. There's many areas of Toryism I cannot stand, but I believe in the United Kingdom. So trying to associate the two together is absurd. And actually, it's just not realistic because all 3 big parties in the UK, in fact all 4, if you consider UKIP the 4th party, are pro-union. So there's an overwhelming political support for the union. And Bobby Gillespie, I'm not too familiar with the guy, but he's making a good point. The idea that only Scotland has been hit by austerity is ridiculous. There's many parts of England have been hit hard by austerity. And protests to austerity are widespread. So for Scottish nationalists to turn this into an England versus Scottish thing, I think is frankly odious. Susan Boyle hits a good point. The idea that you have to be a nationalist to love Scotland is utterly absurd. And this demonstrates the sort of Lemonist mentality that the nationalists are fostering. And it's got pretty ugly at times. To the point of, if you don't support the SNP, you're not a real Scot. And it's getting very tribal and sectarian, and basically they're escalating it. And I think, regardless of what the outcome is, there's going to be divisions after this. I think J.K. Rowling's absolutely right. This is not going to be an easy transition. Now, granted, it may not be violent, like we see in other countries, but it's going to be very complex. And look at the financial argument alone. I mean, I think it's just ridiculous for the SNP to want to break up the United Kingdom, and let's not gloss it over, that's what it means, and then demand that they keep the pound. That's incredibly childish. It's a bit like saying, oh, we want everything, but we're not prepared to make any sort of compromise. And it's just an incredibly petty and arrogant mindset. David Tennant, I echo him as well. Why become smaller? This is an interconnected world which God knows has enough problems as it is. Why on earth, in one of the most politically stable places on earth, i.e. Western Europe, do we want to become smaller? If you look at around the world, with some of the violent separatist campaigns going on, and some of the very serious human rights violations in other parts of the world, and the sort of very complex issues going on, why on earth would it benefit either Scotland or England to divide? It will complicate international relations, because if the UK breaks up, we lose our place at the Security Council. It complicates everything. Now, call it what you will, but I happen to think that it's good that we have a leading role in the world. Yes, it means responsibility, but I'm proud of the fact that we are a leading nation, not a following nation. I just think that, I mean, believe me, this is not the last video I'll be making on the subject, but I think this is a good sort of 50-50 thing. Of course I'm biased. I believe in the Union. And one thing I would say is it's absurd for the nationalists to try and turn this into a Tory issue. David Cameron is not going to be Prime Minister forever, and the Tories are not going to be in power forever. Ed Miliband may well win in 2015, we don't know. But for them to try and turn this into a Tories versus Scotland issue, or an England versus Scotland issue, it's typical of the cybernats them and us mentality. And what they're actually doing is, it's like a witch hunt against Scots who believe in the Union. Now, to be fair, I'm sure there are some Unionists who are also quite extreme. I'm not saying everyone on the Unionist side is reasonable, but I would say the proportion of nationalists who think in a petty and them and us mentality is a lot higher. I mean, what does it say about the United Kingdom that this referendum has taken place in the first place? If this was such a terrible country, which the SNP and their supporters obviously believe, then David Cameron would be sending in the army and there'd be a brutal crackdown, like you would see in totalitarian regimes. But no, what's happening is they're getting their chance, they're having the referendum. I sincerely hope the Union stays. But what does that say about the United Kingdom? It shows how great this country is, that we are actually allowing a referendum on independence. Try imagining that in a country like Russia or China. So, clearly the UK is so awful that we're allowing the Scottish nationals to have their say in a referendum. Now, I believe in democracy, I believe in self-determination. If the Scottish people overwhelmingly vote for independence, that's the way it will be. But I think it would be an utter tragedy. I mean, as imperfect as the Union is, I just cannot see any reason for breaking this country apart. I love the United Kingdom. For all its faults, I think this is a great country. And I cannot stand what Scottish nationalists are doing. The sort of divisiveness that they're stirring up. And actually it isn't just the Scottish nationalists, this is only going to encourage English nationalists as well, and every other petty-minded nationalist in this great country, the United Kingdom. It just, in my opinion, no voters are the ones who are thinking progressively and thinking about the bigger picture. Yes voters, or yes supporters, overwhelmingly are petty-minded, ultra-nationalistic, and have a them and us mentality. No is the inclusive side, yes is the them and us side, Scotland versus England, etc. So, come September we'll know. But that's just a few opinions from both sides. Yeah, I just hope the UK stays together, because that will be a tragedy, an utter tragedy, if this country just... And the apathy towards it is... I think it's sad. We could literally be talking about the end of the United Kingdom. It's nothing short of that.